Hello. We've put together a presentation for you that will briefly go over the existing assets in place for the School Board of Sarasota County, and then delve into proposed security and enhancements to provide a compliant and secure information technology system for the school board and its members. The first thing we need to address is what information is there to be secured and for what purposes is the security needed. This breaks down into largely three main groups. Internal documents, the data which is created and owned by the board members for themselves to work on amongst themselves. Security here is primarily needed to prevent unauthorized access or modification. Public information, the data which is put out after having been approved for public consumption. This is the data that today lives on the public website. Security here is concerned with preventing unauthorized modification. And finally, private communication, the means by which members of the board are able to engage in private correspondence. Security here is concerned with the same prevention of unauthorized access as before. And in all cases, the availability of the systems is a concern. Security implemented in such a way as to make the tools unusable is not effective, as users will simply find easier, less secure means defeating the purpose. As we take stock, we need to understand the users of the system and who to secure so as to limit our scope and provide the best possible security systems for the need. We can categorize these who in two broad groups of users, internal and external. Internal users will be those that we consider the most relevant to the board and needing the most attention. Obviously, the board members themselves will fall into this category. However, there are assistants to these members and to the board itself who will be working closely with the board and who will need access to the same documents and same means of communication. These board assistants will also be considered internal. But then there are also additional assistants listed here as technical assistants that comprise the support staff that helps the board publish information. We can consider the webmaster that maintains the public website to external to the board, as they do not need day-to-day access to the same documents as the board and their direct assistant, and will only need information communicated to them privately to then make available. While Peter Drucker may not be a security expert, the phrase, "the computer is a moron," and "the stupider the tool, the brighter the master must be," from 1967 still rings true today. A comprehensive and proper security system is not simply the software installed, the firewalls installed, and file permissions put on a document. Good security requires the master of the computer to be smart, and that means implementing proper people controls in the form of operational and administrative controls that will enable the system to be kept up to date with changes in the board, as well as helping clearly delineate the roles of the users respectively. Operational controls we will discuss involve policy, onboard, and offboarding procedures to follow to ensure that changes in the organization are reflected and applied to the technical controls. Administrative controls we will discuss involve user roles, the expectations and limitations of different users, access to the system needed to complete their work. And finally, technical controls we will discuss involve the nitty-gritty of the software we propose that will make use of these operational and administrative controls. Operational controls are at their core the people controls, and that they're the means by which the people are kept on or off, the access roles for the system in question, who gets added and when, and who gets removed and when. These sorts of changes we propose involve the creation of new policies and procedures to be followed along with existing onboarding and offboarding of board members and assistants. In addition, we create a policy specifying that only the department in charge of employee management, HR, may specify that a new account may be created and access granted, or for an account to be closed. By doing so, there is a clear chain of action and command, and there's no room for "well, X told me to" that bypasses security. Operational controls also encompass audits, which will be an inspection of the new systems to see that the policies written have been followed. Should the policies or their implementation prove to be ineffective, it is an audit which will expose this and lead to the beginning of a discussion anew on how to apply these or new policies. The school board consists of internal and external users. Internal users are comprised of board members and their assistants. These users will access the network locally. Technical assistants are external users who will connect to the network via VPN. Technical assistants will access the documents pertinent to them. Changes made to the website will have to be approved by board members before said changes are publicly visible. Technical controls are the means to which the ends of the policy is implemented. The how to the what. We'll spend some time breaking down each of the individual items you see listed here, and our reasoning behind each individual item. In general, we're proposing a system that is largely contained within a private LAN, accessed through a VPN, and backed up on a local and remote server. Because everything is controlled by the board on its own servers, data retention and archival for compliance is easily assured. External services are used for external access only when and where it makes sense. Email is as ubiquitous as it is poorly designed, a protocol from when you could map out the entire internet on the back of a napkin. It has a fair share of shortcomings. However, as it is an important tool for the board and simply not using it is not an option, we're suggesting that a private email server be created for the board's internal and limited external use. We're able to mitigate the issues of spam and viruses and be good neighbors in the realm of email by configuring SPF and DKIM technologies developed to help combat spoofed emails, and by setting up the system to automatically scan all incoming emails. And most importantly, we limit the access to the server by making use of a firewall and a limited user base so that only those who should have access will, and so that it isn't any more exposed to the outside world than it needs to be by nature of being an email server. Because the board will own the server, it will also own all the data. This fact, combined with a proposed backup solution, which we'll get to in a moment, will allow for proper retention of communication for compliance with laws that compel it. When using a physical file server, it is important to maintain it in a secure location. If an intruder can gain access to it, you may risk all of the information within it to be stolen. You could also configure it so that it could only be opened through an internal hard drive. Try to keep the file server off the internet if possible. There is very little reason for most file servers to be connected to the internet. You can use a firewall to prevent access from outside of your LAN. To keep track of any changes, make sure to use the auditing function provided to see who is attempting to read, write, or delete your files and folders. Although it may not be entirely necessary, it is a good idea to control file access through NTFS security to restrict file and folder access to specific individuals so that each member of the board can only manipulate the files that they are in charge of. The proposed file server should be the HPE ProLiant DL20 Gen 9 server. It is compact, simple to set up, and start using. The server will be running Windows Server Standard 2012 R2. Antivirus software will be necessary on the system to prevent the spread of viruses from file transfers. It can start at 10 terabytes of data, but you can always upgrade should the board find that they require more space. When utilizing a web server, one important aspect of maintaining the editing safe is to apply a two-factor authentication process. The board still needs to maintain the information safe, and it should be mostly edited within the office facilities. By adding a second code that is randomly generated and can only be accessed via a physical device within the office, you add an extra layer of security for your information. Having your web server be hosted by an outside source provides multiple automatically updated security services that you will not have to maintain, such as automatic backups. Backups themselves are not a security measure, but they are a good part of any security system in that they provide for recoverability from a disaster, be it data loss or an intrusion that leads to data loss. Backups then are best when they are regular and tested, and stored near and far from where they are needed. We propose the use of the Assay series of backup solutions. OBM is a software that runs as a client on each machine that needs to be backed up, from the Windows machines used by the board members to the Linux servers and devices that make up this proposal. OBM can back them all up. And now for the big scary numbers. As you can see, the backups are the single most expensive part of this, but that's because they are crucial to recovery from any sort of disaster thrown one's way. Upfront costs encompass the physical hardware and, when necessary, the operating system to run them. We have limited costs on the OS front by using Linux extensively and only make use of Windows, where the cost and effort to set up a similarly functioning Linux machine is not warranted. Cyberattacks can cost businesses and organizations tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars per incident to investigate and repair vandalized systems. By hosting the file server on a VLAN that is only accessible to the local area network, we reduce the attack surface by not exposing it to the internet. The remote clients will still be able to access the server through the secured VPN. For this process to ultimately be successful, we project needing about 3 months to enact all changes needed. In the first month, we will aim to write up the policies for the operational, administrative, and technical controls, and provide them to the board and the other users of the system. Later in the month, the physical machines will be set up and configured. Going on into the second month, kinks will be worked out of the systems, while users are then educated on what the new policies and systems mean for them, and how to use them. An initial audit will be conducted to establish the baseline of compliance, and then in the third month, the systems will be considered production live environments to be used by the board. We hope this has been an informative proposal for you to consider. It is a look into the needed changes and suggestions we have to help keep the board and its system secure and compliant.